Hello, welcome along, hope you're all well. We're back in Microsoft Flight Simulator for another video, and today we're going to be talking performance calculations, and in particular the new performance tool added to SIMBRIEF. And this has been out for a couple of weeks now, so I've had plenty of time to test it on various flights and aircraft, and I can tell you it's absolutely fantastic. It works brilliantly for both takeoff and landing calculations. And in addition to that, I've also been doing my usual rounds on the various forums, and I keep seeing the same threads popping up with people asking why are the SIMBRIEF calculations different to my EFB and which should I use, which is a totally valid question. So we're also going to do a bit of a side-by-side comparison of the SIMBRIEF calculator and our performance tool inside the flight tablet of the pmdg 737. So let's hop over to SIMBRIEF and get started. So here we are in SIMBRIEF in our Edit Flight tab, and we're going to plan a flight from here in Stansted up to Edinburgh. And I have my aircraft selected, the pmdg 737-800. Let's hit Generate Flight, and that'll just take a couple of seconds. And there we go, that's generated our flight plan. If we come down to the menu on the left hand side, you'll see a new tab that says Performance and Tools. So we'll click on that, and this brings up our performance calculation window. As you can see, we can sort of use all these drop downs and add all the information manually, but as we've just generated a flight plan, what I'm going to do is click on this button at the top that says Populate from Last Flight. So we'll click that, and that brings in all the data from our OFP. So we've got our aircraft type there, and the airframe is the economy configuration for the PMDG. There's our airport, runway 22, and that gives us also the runway length there. The shorten length, that is if we're going to do an intersection, we can shorten the runway length, and then we can just select our preferred units for length and weight. And as you can see, it's also pulled in our takeoff weight from SIMBRIEF. So all these calculations are going to be based on what's been generated from our flight plan. We can select our flaps for takeoff, our thrust settings. We'll leave everything on optimum. We can also choose our bleed and anti-ice settings for takeoff. We'll leave those on auto, and then it's populated with the live weather. So we've got our wind, our outside air temperature, the QNH, which we can change to hectopascals if we wish, and then we can select our runway, whether it's dry or wet. And then if we want to update that at any point to make sure we've got the latest weather, we just click that Populate Weather button, and then we'll just leave our assumed flex temp and our improved climb calculations on enabled, and hit the blue Calculate button. And there you have it. So if we take a look at our takeoff performance window on the right, it's got all our aircraft details, our takeoff weight, bleed and anti-ice settings, and it's gone for a flap 5 takeoff, toga thrust setting, flex temp 52, and our V1 of 149, rotate 151, and V2 157. And then moving down, we've got our takeoff limits, so max takeoff weight, that kind of stuff, and then our weather info, which we've already gone over, so that's all looking good. And then it's got our runway info for runway 22 at Stansted, and then we get this rather nice sort of schematic overview of everything we've just gone through. So there's our V speeds on the right hand side, and then on the left in the red arrows, it's got our latest reject point, which is 6,900 feet, and also our stop distance at 8,720 feet, with a margin of 1,200 feet. And then we've got this rather nice graphic of a windsock showing our wind speed and direction. Okay, and if we come back up to the top, we can also view all our data in raw format, which is basically everything we've just gone over in one window. It's a bit more like what you'd see in an OFP, that kind of layout, but I kind of like the formatted version, sort of a bit easier to read, I guess, so we'll stick with that. And also, if we click on this little button here that says About These Calculations, and it says, due to differences in calculation methods, safety margin considerations and reference data, SIMBRIEF's takeoff and landing calculations might not return exactly the same results as your aircraft's EFB. Both results may be equally valid, however it is recommended to cross-check against your aircraft's own performance calculator if one is available. So, as discussed in my intro, let's do a bit of a side-by-side comparison between the SIMBRIEF calculator and our performance tool in the pmdg 737 flight tablet. Let's just zoom in on that. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see both screens okay. Let's hit the performance tool icon in the flight tablet to open up our calculator. Now let's start by cross-referencing all our settings, make sure everything's the same. So we've got our airport, our runway, so we'll select runway 22, and that brings up all the elevation, runway length. Conditions are dry, so that's fine. And then let's import our aircraft info from our flight plan. So that brings in the same takeoff weight as we've got in SIMBRIEF. And then let's import our centre of gravity from our aircraft, and that's actually just changed the weight. So let's click import from OFP again. There we go. So we've got the same takeoff weight, and we can import our weather. Just compare that. All looks pretty good. We're a couple of degrees out on the wind direction, but our outside air temperature and QNH all look the same. And we'll just populate that again from SIMBRIEF to make sure it hasn't changed. And that is about it. So all we need to do now is hit the green calculate button, and there we go, that's brought in all our calculations. So let's have a bit of a compare then. So we've got flaps 5 for takeoff, which is the same. We've got toga thrust rating, which is the same. We've got a cell temp of 51 degrees, which is 1 degree out, so that's pretty good. We have 52 in SIMBRIEF. And then we have a V1 of 142 knots, which was 149 in SIMBRIEF. Rotate 144, which was 151 in SIMBRIEF, and our V2 of 148, and we've got 157 in SIMBRIEF. So we've got about a 7 knot discrepancy between the two calculators, so that's okay, that's all within limits. Both are going to work okay for us. Right, so back over to SIMBRIEF then. Let's click on our landing performance tab, and we can now start looking at a calculation for landing. And we'll first start off by dropping down the method to dispatch, so we can check everything's okay on the ground. So we've still got all our relevant aircraft details. It's populated the arrival runway. Now the weight is still going to be our estimated landing weight, so it's generated again from our flight plan. So for the purposes of the dispatch, that's fine, but once we're in the air, we'd obviously have to sort of tweak that. So let's hit the blue calculate button, see what it throws back at us. So up to the top right then, we've got our landing performance, our landing limits, and we've got our weather and runway info again. Then on the schematic, we've got an actual stopping distance of 4,599 feet and a factored distance of 7,680 feet. And if we look at the landing limit section, it's happy we've got enough runway to land on, which is good. So yeah, everything looks pretty good for our dispatch. So let's head back over to our flight tablet and hit the landing dispatch tab, and we can import that from our OFP. Select our runway, which was 24. That looks good. It's got all our aircraft details. Let's import the weather. Now let's just cross-reference that we've got the same info in SIMBRIEF. Wind looks good, outside air temperature is 11, which is the same. QNH looks fine as well. So let's hit the green calculate button, and there we go, that's our landing dispatch info, which marries up nicely with what we have in SIMBRIEF. Okay, so let's now focus on our in-flight method, or landing en route as it is in the tablet. So back to SIMBRIEF, and we'll drop the method to in-flight. And just before we hit the blue calculate button, I've just noticed our runway in Edinburgh is actually wet, so I have that set wrong for the dispatch. So let's head over to the EFB and hit our landing en route button, and then back over in SIMBRIEF, let's hit the blue calculate button to get our landing performance. There we go. So we've got our actual landing distance now is 5,700 feet, and our factored is now 7,490. It's happy we've got enough runway to land on, which is all good. And if we just take a look at the bottom just to confirm those figures, everything's looking fine. So back over to the EFB, let's import our aircraft details and set our reverser config to no credit, auto brake set to 3, and what else were we going to do? Oh yeah, the runway conditions were wet, so let's select that to wet. And let me just head back over to SIMBRIEF to make sure everything matches up. We've got flaps 30, which is the same, auto brake set 3, that all looks fine. So back in the EFB, and let's import our weather and hit the green calculate button, and there we go. So our required landing distance is 5,615 feet compared to 5,701 in SIMBRIEF, so that's within about 85 feet or so, so virtually spot on. Impressed with that. And let's also compare our VREF in SIMBRIEF. What do we got? So we've got 153 knots in SIMBRIEF, and our EFB is saying 154. So again, virtually spot on. So that is pretty impressive. And to conclude, both calculators do provide very similar results. As we saw, there were some slight differences. In particular, SIMBRIEF seemed to produce slightly higher V speeds for our takeoff, which is fine. They're still totally valid and provide realistic results. And to answer the question, which should you use? Well, I guess that's going to come down to personal preference, really. As I said, they both produce valid calculations. For me personally, as I primarily fly airliners like the 737, 787 and A300, which all have performance calculators, I'll probably stick with those. It's a bit more immersive having it inside the flight deck, but I guess where SIMBRIEF really shines is for all those aircraft that don't have flight tablets, and it does currently support over 100 planes, which is fantastic. And it's also totally free, which you can't beat with a stick. So there you have it. Okay, I'm going to leave it about there for today, guys. That concludes my review and comparison of the SIMBRIEF performance tool. I hope you found the video useful. If you did, give it a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.